Hello and welcome everyone to the next session of our Devon and Beyond webinar series. If you missed any of the previous sessions, you can find the recordings on the same Devon and Beyond page where you registered for this session. And while you're there, please take a moment to review the other series and webinars that we have added for you. So these are the various series that are there right now, and we keep adding more sessions to these series. These Devon and Beyond webinars are hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for end users. You can create a free account on Cloud Customer Connect to join in discussions, ask questions, and look for upcoming events on various topics. In today's session, you'll learn about various security features, services, and tools offered by Oracle Cloud Infrastructure to secure your Oracle Cloud workloads. We'll talk about how security is built into each component of your cloud environment to improve your security posture. My name is Renu Bhatt. I'm a program lead with the Customer Enablement team. And today I'm joined by Lynn Lois and Olivia Ferda as the presenters. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lynn.
Thank you, Renu. Today we're going to be covering security. And particularly we're going to talk about security of the cloud and in the cloud, and a little difference there between the two. And in particular, we're going to focus time on identity and access management, data protection, monitoring, detection, and prevention. What I like to think of as whack-a-mole, essentially anomaly detection, which is the basis of all of the processes when it really comes down to it. So by the end of this, you're going to be able to describe the shared responsibility model and how it applies to your environment, what you're doing on your daily basis. Explain OCI's identity and access management concepts and strategies, and actually a little bit of the industries. And compare security services available to OCI and their use cases, and learn how to implement the basics of setting up and configuring CloudGuard, which is really all you need, plus a pointer to the documentation, because you can basically edit it the way you want it to use it. So you start off with a basis, right? You have a foundation, and that is the global cloud data center infrastructure that we've put together for you. And depending upon where that data center is, we've worked with both the government and different institutions in that geographic area or in the industry with which you're interested in to work with. So we make sure that you have the capability of having both government and private clouds. You can have sovereign clouds. We have different methods of securing you at the edge as well as internally. And the basis of this, if you think this through, is that you've got a really 5 nines data center. It's not your grandfather's copy room where you just threw some servers in. And you've got the capability of monitoring it worldwide for ourselves. Not that we can see your particular bits and bytes, but we can see what's going on within those data centers and help advise our partners who are sometimes running those data centers or who we're running them, right? So underneath everything is REST API calls. And those REST API calls are available for you to audit and for us to work with as well, if you ask us to, and through a service request. And then on top of that, we've got the security we're going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about observability and management. Key to that is the same thing we're talking about with respect to security, which is those REST API calls, the facts that underneath everything you have access to what's going on. And then the compliance, because we've worked with auditing services all over the world, and then we give you a capability of sending yourself messages, and we're going to talk about different methods of governance. On top of that, we've got, of course, what you would expect with respect to racks and racks of systems, primarily all Sun at this point. And then you have our data services. And if you got data services, you have the capability of turning those data services into analytics, statistical analysis, and then machine learning or pattern recognition at the machine level, right? There's a lot of threads out there, x86 threads, that you can implement different algorithms against. So key to this is, if you're going to put something together like this, you think it through. And the simplest way to make something like this work is have it always on, and to have the basis of this being prescriptive in the sense of you enforce the security posture. Now, we're going to give you all that. That doesn't keep you from turning bits and bits off to fit your requirements or to allow for certain short-term instances. But for the most part, I think we've given you some pretty thorough resources to edit and control what you want to do when you want to do it. And the other side of it is it's integrated. We keep all of our data centers, all of our services, I should say, in the same type of data center with the same type of features so that we don't get confused. So that includes our infrastructure as a service, our platform as a service, and our software as a service. Platform, in this case, we're talking about things like our DevOps service or our database service or our data science service. Those things are all in the same place, running on our hardware. Even our Fusion software as a service is sitting there for you to work with in a creative way. And of course, there's no cost to it because it's in our interest to make sure there's no security breaches here. You may be used to having to do everything yourself. Well, in this case, we're going to take care of, depending upon what service you're running in, different levels. The key is, of course, the boundary. That's what's interesting, right? So if you're using Oracle Linux or Windows, we are also going to be your first call in those circumstances. If you're using one of our SaaS applications, we're going to be your first call in that service. You're using a third party, something you've pulled up that has working for you in those circumstances, then that's cool, but you're going to have to talk to them if there's a problem, right? And then the other thing is your data, and you're going to hear this a couple of times in this presentation. All the data is encrypted at rest and in motion. And then the other thing is we're going to use industry standard user access and identity methods that your security folks will put together for you so that it works out that you can have access to those who need to have access and not have access for those folks that don't need access, but you can all get your job done no matter where it is. That's the trade-off, right? So we clearly have worked out over the last decade a pretty good set of compliance programs. And these are updated. There's a web page for that that you can find on our web pages of what's compliant everywhere, and it changes periodically. This doesn't change with respect. These are basis anywhere. You know, if you're in the U.S. and you're in a government one, then it's going to be one of these. If you're in Canada, it's going to be one of those. If you're working in the healthcare industry, it's going to be this. If it's going to be in the EU, it's going to be that. The point is that this is what we provided as a basis. Rock solid. We've worked with the auditors. Everything's the way you want it to be. That doesn't mean that what you want to do meets those requirements. So the other side of this is we also provide audit teams around the world to work with you as you require to get your implementation in our data centers compliant with these services. The hardware is there, the software is there. Now, what about your hardware, your software, your security practices? Those still have to be taken care of.
And just want to note on the previous slide that if you did want to get a list of all the different compliance documents and download it, you can find that in the console, and I can show that at the end as well.
Thank you, Olivia. I'd forgotten to include that in my link. So as mentioned, you can think about this as a complete system, a series, or you can think about it as an onion, however you want to, where the core of the onion is identity and access management, and the outer rim of the onion is your internet and edge services, like your denial of service protection. But key to this, of course, is who you let in. If you want to let in someone that's not in your organization, they better be part of your consulting team to make it work. Not a bad actor. So make sure you're not being fished for these tools in place. That said, we give you the capability of getting your identity federation so it works across multiple systems. Then, as mentioned, your data is going to be encrypted at rest and in motion. Not only your database, other databases or any data you put in the system is going to be encrypted at rest and in motion. Our compute servers and our storage servers have two really solid methodologies. Number one, we have the hardware security modules that are on in every server, and that's where your keys are stored, and that's how we can change keys from one server to another for one application for another in the same server. But in addition to that, we have off-box virtualization, where both your virtualization for your servers and storage systems in that rack are controlled off of those boxes. And then likewise, using the intelligent NICs and all your networking is likewise virtualized and off that box as well. So it gives you three capabilities that are really forward-looking with respect to security and with respect to performance. Networking, we couldn't do this as an industry if it hadn't been for some clever folks 15 years ago that came up with software-defined networking. And so that's what we call our virtual cloud network. It's just a software-defined network, and it is central to your security because you define what's on it, what instances are on it, what your IP address is, where you're using 32-bit or 64-bit. You control that. And then, as I mentioned, everything is some sort of a signal through the system that is going to be stored and that you have access to. And we're going to give you tools so that you can signal any anomalies that take place. Anything that you don't want to happen that happens, we're going to give you tools to stop it. We're going to tools to fix it, and we're going to give you tools to send messages and saying, "Did you want to do that?" So let's talk to the core of that as identity and access management, and then also compartments. So compartments are simply a methodology, and this is as good a description as any, a logical grouping of related resources. It's no more than that. I think of it as simply a directory like you would with Linux or with Windows. In a directory, you have files. Well, that's for your operating system, but for a data center, you're going to have related resources, right? It could be your virtual machines, it could be other services that you want that are related to that particular set of access. And just like to push the analogy a little further, just like in a directory, you have those files, different groups have access to the files at some level. Some folks can only just see what's in there, and some folks can actually move and edit and read and delete those files. So think of it that way to start. In this particular instance, it's just an example. We've put this in play where you have three top-level compartments: marketing, finance, and information services. And then inside your information services, you have information security, compliance, infrastructure, shared services, enterprise applications, and enterprise data. And different groups through policies have access to different resources in a particular compartment. So you're going to see this is the key to how we do security, is understanding that no user has access to anything. They have to be a member of a group, and that group has access to resources in a location. So let's take another step and look at identity and access management.
And Lynn, real quick, before we move on to this, on the previous slide, I just want to build off of what Lynn said. So from a best practices perspective and security standpoint, you'll notice on here that we have different groups of admins, and it's actually recommended that you do that. So you'd maybe want an infrastructure admin group managing the permissions to your infrastructure resources, shared services admin managing permissions to your shared services compartment, and maybe a general IAM group. And the reason for this is that you do not want a group of users to be granted access incorrectly. So infrastructure, once again, would be more familiar with the permissions needed there, and there's no or less risk of overlap. So it's good to have different groups of admins for your different resources.
Thank you, Olivia. And to further commit, I would say that as a reminder, because I've lived through this with a couple of customers, please have more than one person in your overall admin group. People do go on vacation. People do get sick. There are accidents. So make sure you have multiple people that have access to create and to do the administration that you need. Otherwise, you can get yourself in a world of hurt because we don't have access to it. We send that up when it's set up, and then you have to be responsible for making sure you have the capability. You don't want to be in the situation of not having anybody functional in your administration group. So what about your identity domains? These are simply methodologies, as you see, that this is a little bit of an old slide in the sense of this is the way things were, where we had an identity and access management, and then we had another method of actually doing the life cycle management as much as anything else and talking to third-party apps. But it's all been moved together now, and it's all based on a standard, and it's worth seeing this slide just to think about it with respect not just to Oracle, but the fact that because it is standards based, it is Samuel 2 and little o auth capability, that we can talk to anybody and anybody can talk to us. So it really puts you in a position of not just having Oracle's cloud here, but anybody else's cloud that meets those standards. And the top 4 or 5 meet those standards. Likewise, if you have with a little work, you can get any third-party apps to work. You can also get your apps on premise to work. So it doesn't matter. And so the idea is that with this kind of technology, not only have lifecycle management and multiple forms of authentication management and adaptive access to wherever you want to go. Sometimes you want to have the 2 forms, sometimes you don't. You can give your users the capability of logging in once in a day. Probably another time they'll have to go through some form of 2 form of authentication methodology. And then after that, they can do their job. And then when they log off at the end of the day, everything's secure. Nobody had access that they shouldn't have, but the people that you needed to have access to what they needed to have access had it. And that's the fundamental process, right? And so let's give you some examples. So fundamental, as I mentioned, is this concept of a group and policy. So policy is always the same. It has the same structure, and it always starts with the word allow. And the reason why it starts with the word allow is because by default, everything is denied. You are completely denied to do anything unless you are the universal admin person. In any case, it's allow a group. It's always a group name, to a verb, to a resource, in a location, name of the location. That's it. And there's some wheres that can be over here too. So in this example, Olivia is part of group A. So in this compartment, she has access to manage the compute, so she can start, stop, terminate, create virtual machines, containers, Exadata machines. She can work with NVIDIA GPUs, anything that's involved in the compute realm, bare metal, for example. Whereas I'm only allowed access to Group B, and Group B here is I can look at the virtual machine. I can't start anything. I can't stop anything. All I can do is inspect what's there. Maybe I'm in admin or in accounting, and so I want to know and see what's there and make sure it's correctly being attributed to the right resource, but I don't need to start and stop stuff. So that's the level of detail you can go to. Now, the next slide, we're going to do a little more detailed here. So in here, again, a group name, and then a verb, inspect, read, use, and manage. Of course, manage is the most access, uses a little less, reads a little less, and then inspects the least. And then the object family, it can be all the resources. It can be different group families, and then it can be specific resource types. So you could manage just the objects in the object family. So we manage objects in a project which is this is a container where specific conditions exist. Not container, excuse me, compartment where certain conditions exist. So you can have very tightly wound specific permissions. And that's the recommendations, right? You want to keep folks from doing stuff by accident. Most problems are not caused by malware or all the things you hear about. What it's caused by is the thumb, right? The thumb hitting the key that you thought the index finger was going to hit. So that's the kind of issues you really have, and that's what we've hopefully been able to give you the capability of preventing some of those. Right. So identity and access management at the enterprise level is going to give you the capability of working with external providers, external methods of authentication, multiple external risk providers as well. And you're also going to have VPN clients and Linux hosts, a variety of them. And we're going to put this all together for you, and you can go the inbound, through IAM and outbound. So this is a pictorial representation of the idea that you can sign in at Oracle, be through our policies and our groups, and then it will give you similar capabilities in different locations and vice versa. So you go through Active Directory here and get into Azure. You can go through Samuel 2 and get AWS, or into Samuel 2 and go to Google. It's all similar now, and it all works together in theory. There is some back and forth that takes place. It is software, right? So data protection. I go through that quickly because it's all the same. I'm going to be repetitive. It's all encrypted at rest. It's all encrypted in transit. You can bring your own keys. We're going to have default keys by default, and then if you want to change them up, you'll be changing them up. And because they're stored in a hardware module in the rack itself, then you can change them from location to location, apply them to different resources. It's all based upon Oracle's transparent data encryption. Yeah, that's specific to database, but all this is based on the same kind of capability. In addition to that, any data system that's Oracle's is going to have data safe and data vault capability, and those are higher levels of licenses than you typically would have as an XE or an SE on premise. These are enterprise style license capability, but we're going to give you an upgrade. The minute you move your Oracle data system to OCI, we're not going to tolerate a lack of encryption or a lack of your capability with respect to data safe and data vault. So as mentioned, with respect to the infrastructure vault, it's just a simple way of storing the keys with your master encryption keys, and they're hardware protected. So this is where everything is put in there for you, and you have access to the software to manage this. You don't have access to the hardware to manage this. So it meets all the different requirements, and it is completely integrated with our autonomous database, our Exadata service systems, our software as a service, our object storage. It's integrated in everything that's in OCI, and it supports symmetric and asymmetric encryption, which just means you can use different keys in different locations for different purposes. And it's sort of invisible to you. It doesn't whack you in the face. You don't have to think about which key is where. Once you set it up, you move from place to place. Data Safe is a nice little tool because of our years working with different types of data. We have determined there's patterns of particular interest, like in North America, the Social Security number for the U.S. Right, that's a pattern that jumps out at you if you've got that in your data system. So we're going to mask it for you. That's the type of thing that it will discover that sensitive data, and it will determine how much and what kinds of sensitive data reside in your database. But in addition to that, you can point to things that we don't find that you are in place. And the idea of this is you can, whether you make a copy or not, your developers can work with the data and they don't see the actual data. You're not exposing your customers or that sensitive data, whatever it is, to anybody other than the database itself, right? Those that have access to the database itself. So developers, third-party developers can come in, work with that database system and not be exposed or having your sensitive data exposed to those folks. Monitoring, detection, and prevention. This is what I think of as whack-a-mole, where you have the problem of anything that's an anomaly. It's going to detect the problems. It's going to check the configuration. It's going to monitor those activities. Why? Because there's specific sets, patterns that are in place that are being monitored for you. And we're going to correlate the problems and we're going to apply a fix. So the idea here is then if this happens, else that happens. Simple if then else kind of a process that goes on. And we're going to go with specific targets in place. And that's what CloudGuard in particular is, a set of scripts that you have access to, that you can edit to make this work for you in the sense that of the level for the security stance and you assess your risk posture. So at the simplest level, you have targets. It looks like directories to me, and child and parent directories. And you can start at the top or you can start anywhere here, but be cognizant of the fact if you start here, you only affect this one down here. You start here and you affect everyone in the tree. If you change something here, it affects these in this tree. Their parent-child works for you, can work against you as well. Standard default detectors are, you don't want to be connected with a private subnet to the internet. So you're going to make sure that the public instances that you have are in fact the ones you want to be public. You don't really want to have folks using a Tor shared system in those circumstances. Too much.
Yes, for CloudGuard, this is something that you'll see in the console. So just to reiterate, you have your targets and there's different compartments that you can designate as your target. So it can be your root, some of your subcompartments, and there's different detector recipes for detecting certain problems. So you can use the Oracle managed ones for that. You can also clone those and make your own customizations. And then you also see some problems. There's a varying severity level with that. So it can be minor, it can be critical. And there's also different ways to respond to some of these problems depending on what that is. And then once again, like the detector recipes, you can make your own custom recipe as well.
And that's key to the whole thing. Remember, it's all software. We've already built everything out for you. And what we're talking about are simply the tools that give you access to give yourself further control on this. If you should have all learned working with public clouds, is everybody's built it out for you. It's now just we've created operating systems and methodologies in software that you can have access, whether you're talking about Terraform or Ansible or your software or somebody else's software to access it. And this is just a reminder, as Olivia was saying, is that CloudGuard is simply a set of scripts that you can clone and edit and make the way that you want to work with. And anything else, Olivia?
No, that's all.
All right, thank you.
And I can take us through a scenario on a CloudGuard problem. All right, so let's say that we have a compartment with a bucket, which is designated as a target in CloudGuard, and I have a user, and that user goes in and makes the bucket visibility public. And this is going to set off a rule. Bucket is public right here with problem severity of critical. That problem is then flagged. And depending on the problem, sometimes there's two different routes for going about this. So sometimes you might have the more automated option. So if CloudGuard is enabled, you can be notified via the notifications event service and use functions to do something about it. Or is Cloud Event enabled? In this case, another route too is that a CloudGuard operator can go in manually and take action or dismiss it. And once again, sometimes this might vary on the type of problem. Sometimes you can't always use the automated option for this. And we'll take a look at that. And then there, the responder makes the bucket visibility private. So this is just one example of a type of problem that you will see in CloudGuard. And then the path of action for that. All right, so going into some other different security services in OCI. So one of these being the vulnerability service. So once again, CloudGuard monitors your resources and alerts you of potential issues across your tenancy. But there's going to be some other security services I'm going to cover that allow you to look further into different areas of your cloud environment. And the vulnerability scanning service here will do this by routinely checking your host for any potential vulnerabilities. And this service generates reports with metrics and details about these vulnerabilities, which you can then take action upon. And it can identify several types of security issues in your compute instances. And this might be something like, let's say, ports that are unintentionally left open. That might be a potential area of attack to your cloud resources or enable people to exploit other vulnerabilities. Another type of security issue might be around OS packages that require updates and patches to address vulnerabilities or OS configurations that people might exploit as well. And there's different types of scans that the service can do. So it might be a host scan. So this has metrics about a specific cloud resource that was scanned, including the vulnerabilities that were found, the risk levels, and CIS benchmark compliance. You also have a port scan. So maybe any open ports that were detected on a specific cloud resource that was scanned. And with these, the scanning service can detect open ports using a host agent or using a network mapper that searches your public IP addresses. Lastly, another type of scan that you have is a container image scan, and this has metrics about a specific container registry image that was scanned, including the vulnerabilities that were found and the risk levels. And then after each scan is complete, you can view the vulnerabilities report, which will show information about a specific type of vulnerability that was detected in one or more targets. So that is the vulnerability service. All right, so diving into security zones. So CloudGuard is going to be more reactive. Security zones are going to be more preventative. And so a security zone is going to be associated with a compartment and a security zone recipe. So whenever you create and update resources in a security zone, OCI validates these operations against the list of policies defined in the security zone recipe. And if any security zone policy is violated, then the operation is denied. So let's say, for example, we have a security zone policy that forbids the creation of public buckets and object storage. So if you go ahead and try to create a public bucket in a security zone that has this policy, or if you try to modify an existing storage bucket and make it public, you're going to receive an error message. And likewise, you can't move an existing resource from a standard compartment to a security zone unless all those policies are met. So just to recap, this is CloudGuard's going to be more reactive, and this, as you can see, is going to be more preventative. All right, so going into WAF, or Web Application Firewall. And so this is a regional-based and edge enforcement service that is attached to an enforcement point. So this can be a load balancer as shown on the diagram, or maybe a web application domain name. And the main goal of WAF is to protect your applications from malicious and unwanted internet traffic. So WAF can protect any internet-facing endpoint, kind of giving you consistent rule enforcement across your applications. It also provides you with the ability to create and manage rules for internet threats, including cross-site scripting, SQL injection, DDoS, and others. And then just kind of, here's a quick graphic to show some of the different layers in the WAF service to either deny or allow access. And we'll dive into these a little bit more. So the OCI WAF kind of acts as a reverse proxy that will inspect all traffic flows or requests prior to them arriving at the origin web application, and it will also inspect any request going from the web application server to the end user. So this will allow you to control data leakage from your application servers, as well as protecting your servers from outside threats. And one thing to note, OCI WAF is also integrated into the OCI console, along with many other applications and services offered by OCI. And so this allows you to do things like use OCI tagging with WAF policies for cost tracking. You can use OCI identity access policy to control access to WAF management, and use, maybe OCI audit service to log WAF changes. So you kind of use it with some of the other services. All right, so diving into certificates. So this just provides you with certificate issuance, storage, and management capabilities, including certificate revocation and automatic renewal. And there's a couple terms to be aware of when working with certificates. So first is the actual certificate, and that's just a digital document that confirms its subject is the owner of the public key and the certificate. You also have bundles. A bundle just includes the root and intermediate certificates, the properties of the certificate, so like the version and user provided contextual metadata for the certificate. There's also certificate authorities, or CAs. So a CA just issues certificates and subordinate CAs. So they exist to certify the ownership of a public key and a given certificate, and authenticates the CA signature on the certificates that the CA issues. And within the service, you can create your own private certificate authority. And if you have a third-party certificate authority that you already use, you can import certificates issued by that CA for use in your OCI tenancy. And also just going back to CloudGuard. So CloudGuard also integrates with this and will keep an eye on expiring certificates and warn you of the expiration. Right, so one of the last few things that I want to cover is OCI Bastion. And this is a fully managed OCI service, which helps you improve your security posture by providing secure access to the private target host within a VCN or virtual cloud network. So it's really if you want to access hosts without allowing access over public IPs. The access to the target host via Bastion is time-bound, so this provides restricted and time-limited access to target resources that don't have public endpoints. And the access is going to be governed by OCI IAM policies, which can allow these authorized users to connect from specific IP addresses to target resources using SSH sessions. And when connected, users can interact with the target resource by using any software or protocol supported by SSH. And these targets can include resources like compute instances, database systems, autonomous transaction processing databases, so resources like that. And bastions are going to be more essential and tenancies maybe with stricter resource controls. So for example, you can use a bastion to access compute instances in compartments that are associated with a security zone, since instances in a security zone. And then just a few things to remember. In shared multi-tenant compute environment, Oracle is going to be more responsible for the security of the underlying cloud infrastructure, and you would be more responsible for securing your workloads. We also have a least privilege approach. So this just goes back to identity access management, or IAM. So it's going to be denied by default. So you first have to grant permission to a group of users for working with your different resources in OCI, and there's different levels of permissions that you can grant there. And then you also want to start by addressing foundational security issues and then building off of that. And then you can also use CloudGuard to examine your resources and improve your security posture, which is what we'll be seeing in today's demo. And then lastly, here are just a few links for learning more. So around Oracle University, certifications. If you want to get more hands-on experience with OCI, we have a few resources here. I highly recommend live labs. So there's a few labs over different topics and tools in OCI that you can explore. Some documentation. Here's a specific OCI lab. And then we have some Oracle learning videos. All right, so now I'm going to be hopping into the console just to show you how to get started with CloudGuard and kind of where a lot of these different security services are located. So once you're logged into the OCI console, you can go right here and you'll see the tab Identity and Security listed here. And this is where you'll find the core of getting started. So this is where you have your users, groups, domains, policies, compartments, all of that. So that's kind of at the base. Then you'll see security zones, CloudGuard, certificates, web application firewall, the scanning service, vault, all of it is mainly going to be here. And then you can see some related services. So like virtual cloud networks, logging, OS management, and then there's a help section right here. So if you wanted some more documentation, I highly recommend this. So you can get a security overview, security services and features, best practices too. And I think that in this link, they'll give you best practices for some of the different tools. And also just on identity access management, or IAM. And real quick, before I dive into CloudGuard, I did mention earlier on the slide that Lynn was covering around compliance. If you wanted to see the different compliance documents available and maybe download it, you can go right here to compliance. And you can see all the different types of documents. And you can also filter service, the type, so audit, certificate, workbooks. And then if you go right here, you can go ahead and download it. So if you just want to take a look at all these different documents and have access to it, this is where this is. All right, so hopping into CloudGuard right here. So here's just an overview of what the CloudGuard page will look like. And you have two different types of scores. So you have a security score, and this just looks at a breakdown of problems that have been identified and associated severity, so how many minor or critical. And so you can see the breakdown right here. So if there's excellent, fair, or poor. And one thing to note, let's say maybe your score is good one day, and let's say the next it just drops to poor. I'll show you in a moment how you can, see why that is. And if there's a spike in problems, if something's not maybe being remediated. So just one thing to note, it might be like one score and then, wow, it dropped to that score. So just a few things to keep in mind. You also have a risk score, and this looks at all resources within your tenancy and whether or not they have problems and the risk associated with them. And so in this case, the lower the score, the better. And I think the highest score is 9,999. So it calculates it this way. And also the nice thing too, if you want to learn a little bit more about this score, you can click learn more right here. Here are just some general security recommendations, and we'll be taking a more in-depth look at this in a moment. But if you click view recommendations, it'll give you the top 10 for your different compartments right here. So right now it's just looking at our root compartment and including all the child compartments. So the top 10 recommendations here. Right, so going back to here, here's where you can see a problem snapshot. So kind of give you a breakdown of all the different problems that you have and the severity of that. So is it critical? Is it high? So you can see there's a lot of high problems, medium, low, or minor. So you can see a breakdown here. You can also see a further breakdown of your problems by compartment. So which problems are having maybe the most issues. And you can see in a root compartment, there's quite a few critical, or in enterprise applications, there's quite a few critical. So you can kind of see also breakdown of the severity. And then you should be able to click into that if you want to dive deeper and let's say just the critical problems in this compartment. Also by detector type. And so you'll see this in the setup. So if it's looking at configuration, your instance security, or just activity. And then you can see, once again, the severity breakdown. And then you can exit out of some of this if you didn't want to see some of these detector types. This also shows a breakdown by region right here. So you can, once again, see there's quite a few high ones right here. And lastly, you can also see grouped by instance type. And so, resource type. And so you can see instances have quite a few problems. So there's a lot of high problems here. VCN, there's a few critical ones that maybe you'd want to take a look at. So it's good to kind of get a breakdown by resource type. Here's user activity problems. And this only looks at user activity, not the resource problem. So kind of just more information on who the actor was. You can kind of zoom in and then click into that event. Here's just responder status. So any pending problems that maybe you should take action on. So you can see that right here. And the execution types, in this case, it's manual. Sometimes you might have like the more automated option. And so here's where you'd really also maybe want to look, because you can see that the score above was poor. And let's say like it was fair, it was good, recently, and all of a sudden there's a sudden drop and it's poor. So you can see that trend line right here, but also you can associate it with the new problems trend line. So at the same time that the score went to poor, we can also see there's quite a rise in problems. And so you can click into that point and kind of see the breakdown here. But this will give you a little bit more insight. Hey, there was quite a few problems. And then also this ties into remediation. Are these problems being remediated? Has any action been taken? So just something to keep in mind, if you do notice a sudden shift in your score, you might want to take a look at this. All right, so that's just kind of an overview of what you will see on your homepage once you've enabled CloudGuard and once you've had some of these metrics collected. So first up is you're going to want to specify your target or where you're looking for all these different problems. And so we have several different targets right here. So right now it's just showing the root and all the child compartments. So you can do it your root compartment, you can do a subcompartment or something like that. And if you create a new target, so you give your target a name, so I'm just going to call it test. And then you would specify your target compartment. I'm just going to leave it at root. And then here's where you choose your detection recipe. And so when you're first starting off, you'll just see the Oracle managed ones. But as mentioned earlier, if you want, you could clone the Oracle one and make your own custom recipe to make some changes to that. So if you've done that, you might see, so we have a mock company here called Vision Corp. And so with this fictitious company, we've made a fake detector recipe or a custom detector recipe right here. So yeah, you can go ahead and clone it and make your customizations and choose that instead. So I'm just going to select the Oracle managed one. So that's for configuration. There's some around activity. So you can maybe just use the Oracle one for that. And threat detector. So you can kind of just pick and choose here. And then you also have instance security recipe. So you can include all compute instances and then select a recipe. So maybe just do like the Oracle one or something. And then from there, you should be good to go. But yeah, sometimes the fastest approach too is just use the root compartment as a target where all the child compartments will be included in that, and then just use the Oracle ones. But you can also take a more custom approach with this as well. So that's your targets. You also have some detector recipes or how it's detecting some of these different problems. And so actually I'm going to switch to a different compartment because right now it's just showing all the different recipes. So I'm going to our fictitious company Vision Corp and the recipes that we have here. And so you'll see the option to clone. So if you want to make a customization or even clone one of the existing recipes that you have, you can go ahead and do so. And so you'll see there's threat, configuration, activity. So it's monitoring problems around these 3 different areas. And they're not Oracle managed because once again, these are custom. And here you can see, some of the different detector rules. So I'm actually going to go into activity. So you can see all the different detector rules. So like if VCN was deleted, created, the security list ingress rules change or egress rules. And then you can actually go in here and click edit. And so maybe you want to disable this. You can if you don't want it to monitor that or look for that. Maybe you want to change the risk level. So if it's critical, high, minor, or low, you can change that. And then here's where you have a conditional group. And this is a way to add additional granularity to a rule. So let's say you only want this to apply to resources in, particular area or location. So you can maybe do it by city, region, like in, not in. And so one option is to do a managed list. So instead of typing this in each time, you can make a managed list where you can kind of select from values that you've already created. And I'll show you that at the end. So if you have a managed list, you can just select from that and already have like the regions that you've selected or defined. So yeah, those are some of your detector rules and the changes that you can make there. There's also some responder recipes or how to respond when problems are flagged. So that's right here. And so we've just made our own responder recipe, but once again, you could clone that or use the Oracle one. And so here are the responder rules right here. So you can see some information around it. So this publishes the problem details to the event service. Delete IAM policy. This deletes IAM policy, giving too many privileges. And the notification enabled. And then you can go ahead and edit this. So in this case, you could, enable or disable this. I think that's the only option that will really give you. So if you didn't want it to do this, you could disable that. So you can see like delete public IPs. So it deletes public IPs of the OCI compute instance. So those are some of your responder rules. All right. And then, so let's just take a look at some of the problems that you'll see. And some filters. So right now it's just looking at our Vision Corp compartment and the child compartments of that. You can also filter on open, resolved, or dismissed, or deleted. You can also filter on resource type. If there's a specific, resource that maybe you're concerned with. Lots of different resources here. So like security list, policy, route table. And then you can also filter on first detected, last detected. There's some other filters here. So if you just want to filter on risk level, if you're just concerned with like critical errors, if you're, looking for a certain problem category, like security zone or something, you can go ahead and filter here. Oh, so let me just go back to problems. So you'll see that instance is publicly accessible. So if I go into that right here, this has a more automated option for mediating. So I can choose one of the responder rules that we saw earlier if I want to delete public IPs, stop compute instance, or terminate compute instance. And once again, this won't come with every problem. It kind of just depends on the problem if it has some automation around that. So you can remediate. You could mark as resolved if it's resolved, or you can dismiss it if maybe it's not a problem. But it's nice because you can see the problem OCID, resource ID, detector type, the specific resource, the severity level, all this information here, first, last detected, and a little bit more about this recommendation, and some additional details. So it'll give you the specific instance OCID, route table, public IPs, all of that. And you can also see the problem history here. So how many times this problem has arisen. You can see it here. And then you can see if there are any responder activity associated with this. All right, so we're coming up on time, but that's just kind of give you a high-level overview of problems. You also have right here data masking. So this isn't the data safe data masking that Lynn was talking about. It's just an option to mask information within problems or within the CloudGuard console. So you could use this option if you don't want someone to see who did the action or location of where it took place. Then you can mask that information. So you can create a masking rule right here. And then also just going back to earlier, you can create a managed list. So if you didn't want to type this out each time for like your responder recipes or something, you can go ahead and create a managed list to already select from, and then you can modify that later on. But yeah, that's all that I really want to cover.
If you have any questions, please feel free to send your questions at personaltrainers_us@oracle.com. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions there. But would like to thank Lynn and Olivia both for a great session. I hope everyone learned something new today. Our next session will be on Tuesday, May 7th. Join us if you want to learn about different database services and tools available in Oracle Cloud. We'll review database use cases to help you understand which service is right for you. And we'll also walk through some of the provisioning processes in the console and talk about the security tools available to use with your databases. So if you're interested to learn, please do not forget to register for the session. You can find the details on the same Devon and Beyond page. I recommend that you bookmark the Devon and Beyond page and check frequently for new sessions on trending topics. With that, thanks again for joining us. See you all next time. Have a great day, everyone.